Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Marquez, and I have Matilda here by Roald Dahl, and we are about to read chapter 18, I believe, which is called The Names. Miss Trunchbull, Matilda cried, jumping about a foot in the air. You mean she is your aunt? She brought you up? Yes, Miss Honey said. No wonder you were terrified, Matilda cried. The other day, we saw her grab a girl by the pigtails and throw her over the playground fence. You haven't seen anything, Miss Honey said. After my father died, when I was 5 1/2, she used to make me bathe myself all alone, and if she came up and thought I hadn't washed properly, she would push my head under the water and hold it there. But don't get me started on what she used to do. That won't help us at all. No, Matilda said. It won't. We came here, Miss Honey said, to talk about you, and I've been talking about nothing but myself the whole time. I feel like a fool. I am much more interested in just how much you can do with those amazing eyes of yours. I can move things, Matilda said. I know I can. I can push things over. How would you like it, Miss Honey said, if we made some very cautious experiments to see just how much you can move and push? Quite surprisingly, Matilda said, If you don't mind, Miss Honey, I think I would rather not. I want to go home now and think about all the things I've heard this afternoon. Miss Honey stood up at once. Of course, she said. I have kept you here far too long. Your mother will be starting to worry. She never does that, Matilda said, smiling. But I would like to go home now, please, if you don't mind. Come along, then, Miss Honey said. I'm sorry I gave you such a rotten tea. You didn't at all, Matilda said. I loved it. The two of them walked all the way to Matilda's house in complete silence. Miss Honey sensed that Matilda wanted it that way. The child seemed so lost in thought she hardly looked where she was walking, and when they reached the gate of Matilda's home, Miss Honey said, You had better forget everything I told you this afternoon. I promise I won't do that, Matilda said, but I will promise not to talk about it to anyone any more, not even to you. I think that would be wise, Miss Honey said. I won't promise to stop thinking about it, though, Miss Honey, Matilda said. I've been thinking about it all the way back from your cottage, and I believe I've got just a little bit of an idea. You mustn't, Miss Honey said. Please forget it. I would like to ask you 3 last things before I stop talking about it, Matilda said. Please, will you answer them, Miss Honey? Miss Honey smiled. It was extraordinary, she thought to herself, how this little snippet of a girl seemed suddenly to be taking charge of her problems, and with such authority, too. Well, she said, that depends on what the questions are. The first thing is this, Matilda said. What did Miss Trunchbull call your father when they were around the house at home? I'm sure she called him Magnus, Miss Honey said. That was his first name. And what did your father call Miss Trunchbull? Her name is Agatha, Miss Honey said. That's what he would have called her. And lastly, Matilda said, what did your father and Miss Trunchbull call you around the house? They called me Jenny, Miss Honey said. Matilda pondered these answers very carefully. Let me make sure I've got them right, she said. In the house at home, your father was Magnus, Miss Trunchbull was Agatha, and you were Jenny. Am I right? That is correct, Miss Honey said. Thank you, Matilda said, and now I won't mention the subject any more. Miss Honey wondered what on earth was going on in the mind of this child. Don't do anything silly, she said. Matilda laughed and turned away and ran up the path to her front door, calling out as she went, Goodbye, Miss Honey. Thank you so much for the tea. And we're going to continue on into chapter 19, The Practice. Matilda found the house empty, as usual. Her father was not yet back from work. Her mother was not yet back from bingo, and her brother might be anywhere. She went straight into the living room and opened the drawer of the sideboard where she knew her father kept a box of cigars. She took one out and carried it up to her bedroom and shut herself in. Now for the practice, she told herself. It's going to be tough, but I'm determined to do it. Her plan for helping Miss Honey was beginning to form beautifully in her mind. She had it now in almost every detail, but in the end it all depended upon her being able to do one very special thing with her eye power. She knew she wouldn't manage it right away, but she felt fairly confident that with a great deal of practice and effort, she would succeed in the end. The cigar was essential. It was perhaps a bit thicker than she would have liked, but the weight was about right. It would be fine for practicing with. There was a small dressing table in Matilda's bedroom, with her hairbrush and comb on it and 2 library books. She cleared these things to one side and laid the cigar down in the middle of the dressing table. Then she walked away and sat on the end of her bed. She was now about 10 feet from the cigar. She settled herself quickly and began to concentrate, and very quickly this time she felt the electricity beginning to flow inside her head, gathering itself behind the eyes, and the eyes became hot, and millions of tiny invisible hands began pushing out like sparks towards the cigar. "Move," she whispered, and to her intense surprise, almost at once, the cigar with its little red and gold paper band around the middle rolled away across the top of the dressing table and fell onto the carpet. Matilda had enjoyed that. It was lovely doing it. It had felt as though the sparks were going round and round inside her head and flashing out of her eyes. It had given her a sense of power that was almost ethereal. And how quick it had been this time! How simple! She crossed the bedroom and picked up the cigar and put it back on the table. Now for the difficult one, she thought. But if I have the power to push, then surely I also must have the power to lift? It is vital that I learn how to lift it. I must learn how to lift it right up into the air and keep it there. It was not a very heavy thing, a cigar. She sat on the end of the bed and started again. It was easy now to summon up the power behind her eyes. It was like pushing a trigger in her brain. "Lift," she whispered. "Lift! Lift!" At first the cigar started to roll away, but then, when Matilda concentrated fiercely, one end of it slowly lifted up about an inch off the tabletop. With a colossal effort, she managed to hold it there for about 10 seconds. Then it fell back again. "Whew," she gasped. "I'm getting it. I'm starting to do it." For the next hour, Matilda kept practicing, and in the end she had managed by the sheer force of her eyes to lift the whole cigar clear off the table about 6 inches into the air and hold it there for about a minute. Then suddenly she was so exhausted she fell back on the bed and went to sleep. That was how her mother found her later in the evening. We've got a few illustrations. "What's the matter with you?" the mother said, waking her up. "Are you ill?" "Oh, gosh," Matilda said, sitting up and looking around. "No, I'm all right. I was a bit tired, that's all." From then on, every day after school, Matilda shut herself in her room and practiced with the cigar, and soon it all began to come together in the most wonderful way. 6 days later, by the following Wednesday evening, she was able not only to lift the cigar up in the air, but also to move it around exactly as she wished. It was beautiful. "I can do it," she cried. "I can really do it. I can pick the cigar up just with my eye power and push and pull it in the air any way I want." All she had to do now was to put her great plan into action. And I think we will stop there today.